Welcome back to Creative Space, and I hope everyone's had a fantastic week. I'm so lucky that today's guest has agreed to come on. I know he's very, very busy, but I would like to welcome Paul Parry, our one and only fantastic mosaic guru. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Karina.
I've got to say, for people that know you and know us in the area, some of your mosaics that we've seen are just stunning, and I'm sure that it's kicked off a brand new interest in mosaics. So can you just tell the viewers a little bit about how you started on this journey?
Sure, Karina. It's an interesting process of working through. I'm an engineering person from my background. I worked in local government for 25 years. I ended up my working career as a general manager in a local government institution in South Australia. But by the time I was getting close to 50, I thought, no, there's got to be more to life than local government. So I chose to go to art school, left a well-paying job to, in fact, my wife describes it as I left a workaholic position and became an artaholic. And worked through that process of trying to get my head around art and to understand it. It's something I've always been interested in, but I've never really had the opportunity to pursue it because the position at work just sucked all of my time. And as a result of that, when I moved into art and started to explore it, I was just fascinated by it. But because of my background, I ended up fiddling with painting, fiddling with sculpting, fiddling with this, and loved every bit of it. I couldn't work out what I was going to do. So when we moved to Bargara back in 2014, I started exploring what I might be able to do. I was certainly doing painting and drawing and sculpting at home as best I can. But because of my local government background, I have a real passion for engaging with the community, and I've seen the power of art as a community development tool. And because of that, I wanted to draw on my local government background, but at the same time add art to it and to really engage with the community because I had the time to do that. So I started painting murals, working with the council and did a series of murals around Bargara. I did some work in Childers, I did some work in some private developments. And people kept saying to me, Paul, they're lovely, but do you realise the sun up here is so strong? This is not going to last 5 years. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And then I started to look around and I thought I wanted something that was going to outlast me. And so I started exploring what other materials I could use in an engaged, artistic way, but at the same time to be able to engage and involve the community. And that's when I discovered mosaics.
It's really interesting that you say that when you talk about your journey, and I think there's a lot of misconception that you have to be born an artist or you have to get into it at a young age. And it gives a lot of people hope to say that you started art at a later stage. Now, when you were younger, did you have an artistic bone in your body?
My father was a very good draftsman. He used to draw, sit at the kitchen table and doodle and make these magnificent drawings. So I'm sure it's in my genes. I have no doubt about that. And when I went to school, I was born here in Brisbane, moved to South Australia when I was 12. And when we moved there, I wanted to do art in high school. I wanted to do art and woodworking and metalwork. And they did a test when you started the new school. And they said, no, you're streaming in science and maths. I said, no, I want to do art. And they said, no, you're maths and science. And my parents came in and advocated for me. And in the end, they said no. And I ended up in arts and science. And so I finished high school, went to engineering studies at university. And while I was interested in art, I really hadn't had the opportunity to express it. This is a confession. When I was in first year engineering, I spent more time in the pottery studio and the university than I did in lecture theatre. Consequently, I failed. I went back the second year. I passed most of it, but ended up doing an engineering, drafting qualification. So I became an engineering draftsman. So I had that in my DNA. I had it in my blood, but not in terms of fine art or anything like this. And ever since then, I've always wanted to dabble. I've always wanted to get involved in art, but work, family, other things just took my time, and I really didn't have the opportunity until I started to get serious about leaving work in my early 50s.
I was fortunate enough that the Milby Festival pre-COVID, when you did the beautiful mosaics down at Bargara on the amenities block there, when you get commissioned to do a project like that, are you given a brief, or do they just give you a bit of an outline and saying, we want to see theme, knock your socks off?
I didn't get commissioned to do that. I drove that project from
You
nothing.
drove that, yeah.
In fact, that project was a really interesting journey, and I've actually documented it fully. It's fully available on the Bundaberg Region website. So it's about a 70-page document of how that journey happened and all the processes that are involved in that. But it was a flow-on from my process of learning the particular art of mosaics. So when I chose to work in mosaics, I put aside 12 months to basically read every book I could, watch every YouTube video, and basically spend 12 months just making mosaics in a particular form, to explore every medium I could, every glue I could, every style, and all that sort of stuff. And so basically that 12-month period was about learning the art of mosaics. And all I did was scratch the surface really in that 12 months. And that gave me a series of 26 panels, which I then used as the media for an exhibition. And I chose the toilet block to be the venue for the exhibition. And those panels were graffiti based on what I saw around Bundaberg. I created mosaics to permanently remind people of the permanency of graffiti, even though it's ephemeral, and then used the toilet block as the venue for that, with in mind engaging the community in conversations about, hey, how would you like to do something around the outside of this toilet block, not just have mosaics hanging on the inside. That exhibition was called Flushed Out for two reasons. One, obviously the toilet reference, but two, I was trying to engage with the people who had actually written that graffiti to see if I could actually get them to join me and start putting their art skills into some sort of more positive community ability. That failed, but in terms of the first part of it, I did engage with the community. I ran some workshops down there during the exhibition. I had 50 or 60 people sign up to be part of a community project. I had a 100 signature letter ready to go to the council to say, hey, we want to be part of this. We'd love this to happen. And then I put a proposal together and sent it to the council.
So from that process, what then happens, say you've got it, you've got the okay to do it, and you've got your army of helpers. Do they each get a brief of what you want? Or I know it's, the theme, it's just, well, how about creating this? And then do you get each piece and put it together, or do you try and get certain pieces that will flow on?
That piece at the toilet block at Archie's Beach has two components. One is the fishtail wall, and the other is the Welcome to Bargara component. And I took very different approaches to both of them. The fishtail wall, I engaged and worked with 5 artists, and each of the artists created some of the artwork that formed the base for that work. I was working with Adrian Williams, Julie Hyland, Nicole Wone, Indigenous artists that I've worked with before on other murals. I worked with Jeremy Kirley, and together we created ideas and designs which then were prepared as the base to work on. In terms of the fish, we then invited people from around the world to contribute pieces to that fish wall. And we had a barrier reef scene, so it was all about underwater fish, creatures, whatever it might be. And the only brief that I gave people is, you have to post it to me. And I want it to last. In other words, it has to be built out of materials that they're going to deal with the sun that we're in. It needs to last, and it needs to be posted to me. So if you make a big piece, that's fine if you're going to post it to me. But most of them that came in were small, like A4 size max, which was perfect for me. And then we created, well, there was 260 pieces that we received for that wall. We created about 200 of them here in our own workshops. About 60 came from interstate and a few from overseas to fill that together. Unfortunately, COVID was in the middle of that, so the 30 people who had promised me pieces from overseas couldn't even get to the post office because of all the lockdowns in America and in Canada and UK. I did end up getting pieces from 2 of those countries. And then once we'd received all these pieces, what we did is we drew out the base on the panels, and we used a couple of those artists with me to curate those fish into place. And we used colour, we used style, we used type of fish, we used a whole lot of different narratives in there to try and make it interesting, energetic, and practical. And then our job was then to do that and to fill in the background and to make that work. The second panel, which is the one on the southern toilet block, we created a base for that, and then I worked with 4 schools as artist in residence for 6 months. So we had schools working on these sections that we'd allocated to them. I worked with 2 Indigenous groups, and then I worked with Dylan Sara, who provided me with one of his paintings and permission to make that, which is the big hand and his scene. And that's particularly special because that was his first painting that he made that when he decided to go full-time as an artist. And it's actually the image of him at the rocks just at the creek below the toilet block there when he was learning to swim. So there's that whole process of working with a vast variety of community people in a whole range of different ways. And my job really was to both manage the process. I probably contributed 5,500 hours went into that project. I probably contributed about 1,000 of those. I did 2 of the big panels on the front, the big turtle and those sorts of things. But and obviously Dylan's piece, I did that as well. But the rest of it, I was teaching people, mentoring them, and then if it didn't quite work right, fixing it and finishing it up and making it look fantastic. So that was that project. It was really about building a community of people, volunteers in our local area here who were skilled, interested, excited about getting involved in more projects.
And I have to say, for all of us local people that have been down to Bargara and have seen the work, it is really interesting to stand behind tourists that come and listen to them talk about how it's colourful, how it's absolutely amazing, and how they wish that they had something in their area. Do you ever, when you're doing something like that, I mean, I always think, is there anything that you, looking back in hindsight, is there anything that you would do differently? Would you do that exact piece all over again, or would you change it?
Look, there are a couple of minor things that in hindsight I could look at, but to be frank, I'm still amazingly impressed with the way that came together, with all the people that were involved in that, with all of the hassles during COVID. No, I think it's just an amazing piece of art. And look, that feedback is from everybody that sees it. I haven't heard a negative comment. You're probably aware that project and my work won the Australia Day award for community event for the year. Look, it's had that sort of accolade. It's, as I said earlier before we started filming, I've presented that project to American audience, and they've just been raving about the way that, 1, I engaged with people, 2, the way that we processed it, 3, the way we got quality out of quite a disparate process, 4, the number of schools and communities that were involved in this thing, and 5, the way the quality came together at the end of the day. So as a project, I think it is a pretty impressive template to use to kick off this for other similar projects, and also from other people. As I said, I've presented a couple of conferences on it now, and I've spoken overseas. So a lot of people are tapping into it as a way of learning and saying, well, let's learn from this, and if there are things that need to be done differently. Well, let's learn out of that process. In fact, in the documentation that's on the website about the process, I have put a section in there about things that could have been done a little bit differently. But in terms of being able to engage with so many people in the community and to have people from around Australia contribute to it, and the tourists that those people bring to Bargara, it's quite amazing.
So we're just going to take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about Paul's wonderful mosaics. So stay tuned, and we'll be back after this break. Welcome back, viewers, and my guest today is local artist Paul Perry, who's not only our mosaic guru, but he is known on a worldwide stage, and we're going to talk a bit more about some of the pieces that you've brought in. So I'm just looking at this. This is amazing. This is a bag. So what was the inspiration behind this bag?
Look, it started off with an idea trying to respond to an invitation that Clinton Cross in our local gallery here had one year, which was create a piece of art out of a paper bag. And most people took a paper bag and folded it up or painted on it or did something like that. And because I was into mosaics, I thought, well, why not? I can mosaic a paper bag. And so that's what happened. I was beginning to start to explore three-dimensional mosaic work, and one of the things that I'd been looking at was how do you actually create a substrate, a hand-formed substrate that you can then mosaic to work it through. And I thought, well, I'll use the paper bag as my first model. So this particular piece is literally a paper bag. It's hollow if you look inside, and I built up layers of fiberglass mesh and cement mortar on it, and then mosaiced it. And the idea behind the image on it, because there's goldfish on all four sides, was that during COVID I was starting to feel a bit like a goldfish stuck in a bag, and all I could do was look out, not get out. Even though Bargara, we were very fortunate in that sense that we could still walk the beach every morning. But a lot of people were feeling like that isolation or forced isolation was really putting them into that sort of position. And so that fitted into the theme for the Regional Queensland Art Awards that particular year as well. And what they were looking at was decadence. So I thought the idea of goldfish was decadence, but at the same time within the context of COVID and all the issues that were there. So the story about this is that, while we feel like a paper bag and the only dressing up that we were doing during COVID was to put the rubbish bin out, we wanted a bit of decadence as well, and so we thought about the goldfish in this bag. So yes, that's what it is. It's the image of goldfish within the paper bag, swimming around, looking out, hoping that we can forget all the troubles that we were having during COVID.
I'm just going to gently pick this one up. But this is a ping pong bat.
Turn it around.
Just to show you the back. Now, this is so cute. What was the inspiration behind this?
Again, it was another Clinton Cross process. He was running an exhibition that was based on a ping pong bat, and the same thing. Most people painted it or drew it, and I thought, no, let's actually mosaic it. And for me, a ping pong bat fitted so well into the idea of a cat's face.
Yeah.
And I just acquired some beautiful Venetian glass that I thought would be perfect for the cat's eyes. And so, it just came together so well.
I'm just looking at it, and we will get close-ups of this soon, but There's so much in the tiny detail here in the eyes. Now, I'm always interested to know, where do you find your pieces to go into the mosaics? I know back in the days when I learnt mosaics in high school, we got mum's old cups and saucers and smashed them and made bits. Is a little bit more sophisticated than that now, I know, with the beautiful glasses that are coming out. Do you source these locally, or do you have to send away for them?
Look, I source whatever I can. I'm a materials-based person. If you go way back to my art school art statement, I'm a process-based, materials-driven artist. So from that perspective, I'll work with whatever materials I've got. My final year's art program was based on rust, salt and wax. And it was creating materials, creating art pieces, working with those materials. So for me, the materials, I'll use whatever I can get, bearing in mind, of course, that if I'm doing public art, it's got to be materials that will outlast me, so at least 30 years. Whatever. If I can get stuff locally, I do. I've built up a really good relationship with the four tile businesses here. I work them all to make sure that I've got access to them all. And I buy a lot of my tiles because I use quantities. Like I've probably got 7 tons of tiles sitting in my garage at the moment. So I'll buy those. But I also will use whatever people will give me. And I've sourced a lot of material from people who are selling their house that they've had for 50 years, and they've still got that little box of spare tiles in case one in the bathroom breaks, and they come over to me with this little box of 3 or 4 tiles. Yes, please. Can't buy those anymore. You know, they don't come in those colours. Yeah. So from that perspective, I do, and I do tend to use a lot of tiles because they're accessible. The problem with tiles, of course, is your colour range is very low. So if I get things that are interesting, colour-wise or texture-wise, I'll grab them and store them for later use. Glass tiles are a lot more easy to access, but I don't use a lot of glass tiles, mainly because I'm working out in the public arena and they're a lot easier to break, so I tend to move away from those unless it's a specific commission piece. This piece here, which is my daughter, that's Venetian Smalty, so that's all glass. The problem with that, of course, is that I actually made 2 pieces for my daughter, exactly the same image, one in black and white or grayscale tiles and one in Venetian glass. The materials in that piece there are probably about $400 worth. The tiles were $4. So that's the difference. So if you're making big commissions, and I was mentioning before that I've just finished the piece for the Maryborough Elizabeth Park Rose Garden, that has a Smalty rose in the middle that's about 1.2 metres in diameter. That's $1,000 worth of glass in that little piece. So material costs start to add up when you're making big pieces if you're using materials like that. You can get them. This material came from a Melbourne studio. I buy a lot of my material online now from Sydney studios that come from Mexico or from China. So they're things that are a little bit different. I'm starting to collect opal offcuts. I'm starting to collect agate minerals, things like that I slip in every now and then. I'll add interesting pieces like that if I can afford to. But I'd really love to be able to work with Smalty. In fact, next year I'm doing a mosaic study tour into northern Italy and going to schools, the mosaic schools in Ravenna and in Spilimbergo, and they are where this stuff is made, as well as in Venice, over in the islands over there. And I'm hoping to be able to bring back a large bag. Don't tell my wife, but I'm hoping to be able to bring back a large range of material like that, particularly the golds. But it is very expensive, and it's tricky to use. Like that piece there probably took me 3 weeks to make, because every one of those little pieces had to be finely cut and with a little hammer and hardy and chipped and whatever. Whereas the tiles, I can do it a lot quicker. They're all hand cut. Every single piece is hand cut, so I don't use the pre-cut stuff that comes in the hobby shops, because often that stuff doesn't last. It's just coloured, and you put it into the sun and it fades in a week or 2.
This piece just behind us here, what was the inspiration for that?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the sea and by waves, and I lived down on the sea here in Bargara, and I lived, close to the sea in South Australia when I was down there. So I've always had that fascination, and I've always had this fascination with Japanese prints and hokusai. When I was in Japan a couple of years ago, I actually went to 4 of his exhibitions. So I travelled the country looking for hokusai and his prints, and it was just fabulous. And so I've used that as the base, obviously, for the wave, but this is a Bargara version of it. Bargara, we normally don't have big waves, and stand-up paddleboards are the sort of scene down there. And one of my, I call them my patrons, one of the people that provides me a lot of work is Bill Moorhead from the Headlands Development down there. And his claim to fame is that he always wears these orange shorts. So that's a bit of a homage to Bill and his stand-up paddleboard with this interesting hokusai wave hovering over top of him in terms of where it goes. So yeah, that's the story behind it. It's the Bargara version of the big wave.
It's interesting when you started telling the story about that, and you started mentioning the Japanese influence, because I've been looking at it thinking that looks very much, I can see something else in those waves, and I can see like there's a definite Japanese influence there.
Hokusai,
it's just, We're talking about community projects. So you have another one coming up, and we were discussing that before the show. So can you just explain a little bit about what the project is? And I call him a he, but he could be a he.
It could be a she.
He could be just whatever you want him to be.
So this is it's a sand goanna sculpture. It's about 4.5 metres long. It will be perched up on a rock, looking down over the little yarning circle that has been built into the Bush Tucker Garden. It is a steel armature ferro cement coated sculpture, which will then be mosaiced using the design and a local Indigenous design for the sand goanna. And that mosaicing process will be a community mosaic process, probably running over about 3 weeks in November.
So to do that from start to finish, so the start process, so do you select the design, do you shape it in 3D, what's the next step before you actually get to mosaic?
The first thing I did was I did a lot of research, I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of Googling, I did a lot of talking to people in my networks and finding out who has made these sort of sculptures before, what's the best way to go about it, how do I went back to my art school notes where I made a number of human figures using ferro cement processes, and I tried to work this through, and I had to do that as part of the grant application, because I had to work out a proposal, I had to work out a budget, I had to work out the timeframes for all of these different things and work it through. So it took a lot of research, just getting my head around what was involved in making one of these things. In terms of moving from there, what I then did was try to find a model that I was going to use, an example of what a sand goanna has. We don't have them running around our backyard, so I didn't have one to grab. So I sourced a lot of images, but I wasn't happy with any of them. They didn't quite have the sort of styling that I wanted. So I actually went to the Queensland Museum and went through their specimen details, and I found a specimen of a sand goanna in the museum. I photographed it from every angle I possibly could, and then used that as the base for this sand goanna. I then made 2 maquettes, 2 models. The first one was 1/20th size. The next one, that didn't have enough detail on it, so I then made a bigger one, which was about this big. And that maquette, I was happy with the way it was looking and the layout. I then used that to scale off the drawing and did a full-size drawing of the goanna in profile, vertical, horizontal, every one of its legs, and then I added into that the steel structure that I'd need to build to create an armature so that it could prop up on the rock properly, that it was strong enough for kids to climb all over it, because they will. That's the idea of public art. It has to be strong enough to do that. And then once I had that design all did, I worked with CLS in their metal shop, and my son works over there, so I had an in, and he come and helped me for half a day there. But I used their welding equipment and their cutting equipment and their bending equipment, and actually welded up this steel armature, which is basically the framework for this goanna. And it's now in at Kenko Galvanizing to be galvanized to make sure that it doesn't rust on me, some time down the future. Longevity, it's got to outlast me at least. And then when I get it back in about 4 weeks' time, I'll be packing it with foam, shaping it with adding extra expander foam around the outside of it, getting its final shape, coating it with 2 layers of fiberglass mesh and cement render. Getting it smoothed and grinding it and shaping it to exactly getting the figure. And during that time, Byron has also come up with the design. I'll then be overlaying the design onto that form, and then that's when we'll start mosaicing.
So,
and it's 3-dimensional, so we'll be doing the belly as well as the back.
So we look at a piece of art and it's absolutely amazing, and we look at the journey, and I think this just gives the viewers a bit of an idea. So next time you're looking at something like this and you think, oh, that's easy, it's a piece of cake. It's not quite as simple as just putting it together and getting it out there. There's a lot of research, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realise, that you can't just go, well, we're going to put a goanna there and next week is done and dusted.
Look, I'm hoping that my next sculpture will be a little bit easier, but I doubt it, because I'm always pushing the boundary somewhere. And it'll be in a different form and a different shape, and we'll do other things like that. But at least this is a test piece for me, and hopefully what it's done is given me the experience to be able to say, look, yep, I've done one, and I know what I did right, and I know where I can improve. And then for the next time, I can push myself a bit better.
So what would be the best advice that you could give someone who's never thought about even art or doing mosaics, thinking, as you said before, you were a little bit older in life? What would be the best advice about someone who's always wanted to do it? Where do you start? Where do you go?
Well, my journey was that when I was working, I was a general manager in a local government institution. I was in a very stressful state. My wife was, she's a psychotherapist, and she had some clients at home, and she would kick me out to the shed out the back in the evening. And I said, I need to do something to deal with my stress. So I got a piece of canvas, 8 foot high, pinned it up on the wall, and I started throwing paint at it. Literally started throwing paint at it. I went to the local cheap shop and bought tubes and tubes of Montmartre cheap paint, and I mixed it up in big buckets, and I threw it on this paint and scraped it and did all sorts of stuff. At that stage, I had never done any art training or never had any experience or anything like that. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of doing this, and I'd scrape it off and I'd throw it back in the mix and get rid of it because it was all muddied by that stage. But I started to realise there's something there. It was starting to, one, I was getting good therapy. One, it was fantastic art therapy. And 2, I was starting to see that, hey, there's something here that I could actually do. And with the number of conversations with my wife, it was not long after that she'd said, Paul, you want to do it? Let's give up work and go for it. And I went to art school. So I do thank her for that sort of generosity in terms of supporting me through that process. But in terms of advice to people, look, go and have a go, do something. Just even if it's out in your shed, have a play. Find a like-minded person who you can sit down and throw a few things around. Go and do some of these paint workshops that there, and just get a bit of an experience. Get down and dirty. And if you want to do some mosaics, come and join one of the community workshops that we've got going. They're up on the on Bundaberg Arts Network, and I'll be sending out more material about it soon. But come along and have a try. The only thing you need for mosaics is, because we cut everything, you do need to have a reasonably strong wrist. that's it. Other than that, we can start from scratch and, as you say, smash a few tiles and smash a few plates, and I've got all the experience with the glues and how that all works, and if it doesn't work, don't worry, I'll scrape it off and fix it.
That's really good advice to give people. Look, it's been a joy talking to you, Paul, and I love the fact that when we were talking about it before, that you are now part of this worldwide network. So it's not only focusing on the actual mosaic art, it's focusing on, I think Bargara is no longer going to be this little, I think we'll have one of the most infamous toilet blocks, probably even better than the toilet block at Wentworth. But
well, Maryborough's got its claim to fame for its toilet block. It's golden cistern.
Oh,
but it's not mosaic.
It's not mosaic. So, Paul, it's been really great talking to you, and you've given us a bit of an insight into mosaics, that it's not just a matter of, we don't have to be boring anymore. It's not like it was, but we've all started somewhere, and I think it's given people a lot of encouragement to say, well, you're never too old to start somewhere. And, I look at your journey and I think, well, if you can do it, so can anyone else, And it's art, it's just beautiful, and I love the fact that it's so different. So thank you so much for being our guest on the show. It's been absolutely amazing, and I'm sure to get along to a workshop or two, and I can't wait to see more work. I'm really looking forward to the next one, the finished project. So thank you.
Thanks, Karina, it's been my pleasure.
Thank you, viewers. Well, as I said, go and check out Paul's work, and if you are down at Bargara and you've never been to the toilet, Kelly's Beach there, go, just for the artwork. And we hope to see you somewhere creating space and having a wonderful time. Until then, take care.